Okay, I think we can get started now, and we'll continue to let more people in as they arrive. All right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat, and thank you all so much for being here. My name is Claire, and I'll be one of your hosts for today, and my co-hosts are Jolyn and Gail. So, we are STEM and Rose, a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to encourage female students to explore and pursue STEM while also supporting each other to create a close-knit community. So, our speaker today is Dr. Bridget Rothwell. Unfortunately, our other speaker, Jennifer, isn't feeling well today, so she couldn't make it, but that's all right. Dr. Rothwell, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, sure. So hi everyone. My name is Bridget Rothwell. I am a Director of Regulatory Affairs currently at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. And I am a pharmacist by training. So I'd say absolutely loved math, science, and all things chemistry as I kind of grew into my love of, pharmacy before getting into regulatory affairs.
Yay. Thank you so much. Now we'll dive right into the questions we have prepared for Dr. Rothwell. Our first question. So, Dr. Rothwell, you spent over a decade in regulatory affairs, a field that many students don't learn about early on. What led you to choose this path, and could you please give us a brief overview of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. No, and kind of like I said, in high school, so it would have been great to have an organization like this to be a part of and grow a community, especially since I loved math and science, particularly chemistry, and I think that was really what kind of led me in the direction of wanting to pursue a career or, a degree in something in the healthcare science field. I ended up pursuing a career in pharmacy, and a degree in pharmacy at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm originally from Connecticut, so it wasn't too far of a distance. Really because I wanted to help patients. My parents both were nurses, so a very heavily healthcare family. And so it was really, like I mentioned before, that healthcare science field kind of was something that I was interested in. But I definitely wasn't sure if nursing was for me, so went more the medicine route because of the fact I loved chemistry. And then during pharmacy school, and so it's quite intense. It's you kind of don't really know. There's lots of different areas of pharmacy that you can kind of explore, and you'll like learn that towards kind of the end, or you can pursue internships and whatnot throughout your pharmacy, your 6 or 8 years that you're in school. Um, and I had the opportunity to pursue an externship and rotation. So that's really those like you kind of have to do these basically free hours of going in different types of pharmacy settings. And the fact that I was able to do one at the Food and Drug Administration was really unique. It's a application process, so you have to apply through your school. And the fact that I was accepted was really exciting. And it really opened up a whole world of what I could pursue in my pharmacy career, really at that point in time. And that's really where I started to think of, okay, do I want to be in regulatory? Do I want to be in safety? I did focus a lot at FDA at patient safety. So I was in basically looking at all the labels that, the drug label that you see on like bottles of your pharmacy bottles. And so looking at the labels and seeing whether or not there's any way to interpret or cause any harm to patients. Is it worded incorrectly, or could they interpret it differently in some way, shape, or form? And so I focused a lot of my time at FDA on just really the safety of patients. Um, there's again lots of different areas of what you can do with a pharmacy degree in the pharmaceutical industry. But at the end of the day, I felt that my kind of what my true skill set really lied in regulatory. So I liked how the fact that I was able to see all sides of a drug development process. So from early development, or like basically bench work, to basically having a drug approved, and then any potential life cycle management that would occur. So any updated labels, and then monitoring safety throughout the process of a drug. And the fact that I was able to not just impact a patient immediately in front of me, but millions of patients. And one of the mentors that I had at FDA was the minute a drug gets approved, it's the largest clinical trial that you could ever run. And it's true because the fact that you really don't know what's going to happen. And obviously, you've done tons and tons of studies, but you want to make sure that that drug is safer for patients throughout, even the ones that get it post-approval. And so I'd say that was really kind of what solidified my love for regulatory affairs. Um, and then there are different ways to get into the pharmaceutical industry post getting your degree in pharmacy. But I did pursue a postdoctoral fellowship. So it's a 2-year kind of training. You are a full-time employee, but you also can do it with a university. So it was with my school that I had gone on. So Mass College of Pharmacy has a postdoctoral fellowship program with lots of different companies. And so I had one in regulatory affairs, and I did that for 2 years, then stayed on with the company and switched. So I've only been at two different companies, but so Sanofi Genzyme in rare disease, and I focused on rare disease and hemophilia. And then now I'm at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and I've been there almost 5 years, which is crazy to think. But that's kind of me in a nutshell and how I got to where I am today.
Wow, that's like really impressive. And I just love the idea of like being able to impact so many people. Um, and actually, we also had a follow-up question about this. So we were wondering what are some of like the other pathways that students can move into from the pharmaceutical field besides regulatory?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So I'd say you can be in medical affairs. So it's mostly, I'd say it depends on, so there's safety. So it's pharmacovigilance, so it depends on the name, but mostly, so you're looking at all the cases and the events that are happening during the clinical trial and post-clinical trial. So there's that. So you can go into safety, you can go into clinical, and there's different types of clinical, but clinical operations. So you're helping the company run the clinical trials. And so really being a liaison from the company and all the investigators and sites around the world, which is fascinating. And you can, again, pursue a fellowship within that. Um, as I said, medical affairs. So really you're going to, and there's different types. So you could be a publication in the publication space and doing more the medical communications and publications. And then you could also be medical science liaison, and you're actually the one that's going to the doctor's office or the, you know, hospitals, and you're communicating with key opinion leaders and talking to them about therapies, having ad boards regarding, new drug development. So a little bit more externally facing. And same with you can go into marketing, which is again your pharmacy degree. You still understand that, and I think that's one of the beauties of being a pharmacist is you understand how drugs work in someone's body, which is and so you understand your drug way better than if you're marketing it or if you're pursuing commercial. And so it's, I'd say those are kind of like the broad scope. And even in regulatory, there's a lot of different pathways that you can pursue. But I'd say those are kind of the big buckets that, from a fellowship standpoint, that you can kind of pursue.
Thank you so much for that information. Moving back to your job, what does your day-to-day work or your day-to-day work day actually look like? So is it more structured or does it change a bit depending on the project?
Yeah, no, and I'd say no, 2 days are the same. And so that which is kind of one of the things I love about my job is that, a lot of times I'm gonna spend, and I'd say you're mostly assigned to a product or a therapeutic area. So you kind of work and get to love a particular disease and particular product and then follow that, like I was saying before, across the life cycle. Um, but a lot of time is spent um, working cross-functionally with those functions that I mentioned earlier. So your clinical team, a lot of your MDs, your safety team, your CMC, which is your manufacturing team, and your commercial team. And so I'd say regulatory or just like pharmacy in general, I'd say in the pharmaceutical industry is definitely a team sport. You work very closely with teams, and all of those individuals, we're all working towards the same goal. Um, I'm in regulatory strategy, so I'd say the strategic thinking behind certain things. You're coming up with how do I file this particular drug? What's the plan? And thinking about that from a global standpoint. So whether it's in US or Japan and working with colleagues all over the globe. And some of the other days I'd say are a little bit more hands-on. And so maybe a health authority has a question for us, and then we have to really drop everything that we're doing and respond. And so it really depends, again, on the days. And then sometimes you're building up towards agency health authority meetings. So meeting with FDA or meeting with EMA, which is your European Medicines Agency, that is kind of the regulating body in Europe or in Japan. So it's a lot of flexibility, which is great. So you do have quite a bit of changing days day to day. So you never really know what your day, you could have a set schedule, but you never really know what will come. Um, and so it's really just, being flexible, being curious, and, always ready to be a couple steps ahead and planning. Really good, making sure that you've planned ahead. So you're like, if something drops or you have to shift priorities, you're able to make sure that you meet your deadlines and all of that.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I mean, it does sound really fun to be able to work with not just like one product, but with many different products and also like across teams as well. So for our next question, looking back on your career so far, what projects have been the most meaningful or fulfilling for you?
Yeah, no, and sure. So I'd say one of some of the most meaningful products are or projects. I'd say really is work the fact that I'm in rare disease and working on and being able to meet the patients, even though it's not necessarily a project, but I'm working on a particular if I'm working on a particular program or a product that we're trying to bring to market, and then meeting those patients and realizing that like yes, sometimes you're working like on a screen and you're working with FDA trying to get something done, but being able to meet the patients. And then one of the most fulfilling things was being able to get that drug submitted to the agency to expand the indication to then get approved. And so I thought that one, being able to meet them and then being able to deliver them an actual therapy that they could use and was safe for them to then be able to have access to was definitely one of their most rewarding experiences. And I do think so. As I didn't really mention it before, but I do mentor, and I really enjoy developing the younger regulatory professionals. So we do have a co-op program at Alnylam, and it's through Northeastern University. And so I am really I really am fulfilled when I'm able to kind of give back to people who are interested in regulatory. Maybe they're not, but just kind of expose them to something that maybe they weren't thinking about. And then it'll be able to shape their career, whether it's in pharmacy or regulatory affairs or something different. That is actually really meaningful. So some of the co-ops that I've had are actually now in regulatory affairs, and they're professionals and colleagues of mine. And so it is really rewarding to be able to see them kind of come full circle. And then now they're, mentoring co-ops, which is great.
Oh, that really sounds amazing. Yeah, it's nice how you're able to not only use your skills in this field, but also give back to your community through this mentorship. And for a quick follow-up, can you think of a moment where you faced a setback or a challenge in your career and how you overcame that?
Yeah, so one of them was actually, and this is public knowledge, and so one of them was really we had submitted an application to the agency, and uh the FDA wanted a advisory committee meeting, and for those of you that may have seen or with the COVID vaccine, it was publicized, and it's a very intense program project leading up to it's 8 hours worth of really grilling from the agency trying to make sure they understand your drug, the data. And I'd say that was probably one of the most difficult and grueling preparation and leading up to it. And unfortunately, that drug did not get approved for that indication. And it was so heartbreaking. But it really, I learned the most, not only about myself and the resilience of the team members that I have, but it was the fact that it was the way that you look at a program and the way that you pick endpoints. And it actually, I think it made me a better drug developer, and I can challenge my team a little bit more because of that experience. And not many drugs go through an advisory committee meeting. And so the fact that I was able to, it was extremely intense and rewarding, but I'd say definitely something that like kind of made me stronger at the end. The fact that it was the first time I had ever had one. It was the first time that the company had ever gone through it. And so we were all really learning together. And I think, yeah, obviously the drug did not get approved, but we were able to then come back with another drug and get it approved more recently for the same indication. And so the fact that we were able to then deliver to the community really did help. So we kind of bounced back and we're resilient from that perspective.
Wow, that is really like fascinating to me. And it just makes so much sense that, like the biggest adversities or maybe challenges can shape a professional into a better like drug developer. Also, by the way, if anyone has questions, like just drop them into the chat and then we can have a Q&A at the end. But yeah, so kind of related to just career in general, what skills maybe outside of technical law knowledge, like communication or strategic thinking, what of those skills have helped you succeed in regulatory?
Yeah, no, I think you said communication, so I'm going to use that one because communication, this is something I still continue to have to work on. I think it's definitely, you're going to have different audiences across whether you're at a company, if I'm, speaking with FDA or I'm speaking to my team or um, senior leaders at the company. But I'd say being able to effectively and confidently explain a point or position is definitely something that is critical. And being able to explain it to internal, external stakeholders is something that, again, is a lifelong skill that, I will continue to improve upon. Um, this one's more of like a quality, but humility. You don't have to have all the answers. And I don't have all the answers. And I know, but I need to know how to find them. And I need to know how to ask good questions. And so I think just knowing that I'm never going to know all the answers and being able to admit it in a team meeting or, hey, you know what? I need to get back on this. Let me think about it a little bit more and admitting that up front, being able to, acknowledge that and knowing that early on in your career, definitely helps. You don't have to know everything. We're not, no one can. And then just being a lifelong learner, regulations change, the science changes, technology changes, but being curious and just wanting to know how to use the tools and the advent of AI and being able to, be excited and curious to use it. How does that apply to my job and how can that make my job easier in ways, shapes, or forms? How can I be more productive? So it's just from those I think are kind of like my three easy ones that I could kind of give as skills that helped me succeed.
Wow, thank you. It definitely seems like leadership is like such an important role. I guess that moves on to our next question. As a woman in a leadership role, what challenges did you face like early on in your career, and how did that kind of shape your approach to leadership as you gain more experience?
Yeah. I'd say early on, and kind of like I was saying before about like, lifelong being a lifelong learner and being humble. I definitely struggled with imposter syndrome and there is such a large learning curve. And so being a pharmacist and knowing how drugs develop and then going into a completely different field that I had absolutely no background in from my degree, really was a challenge. And just the learning curve and knowing all the regulations and where to find information. I think that was very challenging for me at the beginning, but I was actually incredibly fortunate. I had really strong female regulatory leaders who invested in me and saw my potential early on And I think this is why I love to give back and mentor, our co-ops and our fellows at the company, because of the opportunity these women did gave me early on. They invited me to shadow them in important meetings. They encouraged me to take on stretch projects and projects that I was like, I've never done this before, but they were like, nope, you can do it. You've done this. Think of it like that. And they trusted me to try. And I'd say just the fact that I had these wonderful mentors, and I'm actually still connected to them today, and I still reach out, and they still actually now reach out to me when they have questions, which is really, really great. But I'd say those experiences shaped my leadership style today. So I like to create space for people to grow. I definitely want them to be uncomfortable at times, and if it's something that they haven't done before, I try to help them think about what are some things that they have done that they can then apply to this particular project that they may be working on. And then leading with empathy and authenticity. It's like, again, like I won't have all the answers, but I'm gonna make sure that we can find them together or we can collaborate together. And I'm gonna be there if they have any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think imposter syndrome is definitely something that other women and girls in STEM struggle with today. And I think also strong leaders, as you said, and mentors can really help overcome that. I mean, that's part of the reason we have organizations like STEM and Rose. We hope to be able to like support each other and guide each other through this process. So
Exactly.
switching gears slightly, you mentioned, or in your bio, that you're also an advocate for experiential learning. So for high school or college students listening today, what kind of experiences do you think, like internships, research, or fellowships, are most valuable early on?
So I'd say internships are great for if you're in high school or even in early, like your early college years. I'd say internships are great. Pharmaceutical companies actually have summer internships, and so look out for those opportunities. Sometimes they're, connected with a university or they're connected with a school, and so it's really just do some research up front to make sure that you can apply and you're ready and you have application a short resume together. But I'd say an internship is great because it helps you, like, one, just get exposed to the environment. And you're not going to be able to do a ton in the summer in a summer internship. It may only last, 6 to 8 weeks. And so it's really just getting the exposure and understanding how that working environment is, and if that's something that you think that you could see yourself doing, and also just meeting people, like, person in developing mentors and interviewing people and having coffee chats with individuals in different departments at that company, to be able to see if that's something that you'd want to pursue. You mentioned research projects, and I think research projects are great. I did some when I was in college, and it's really just working with your favorite teacher, favorite professor, and saying, "Hey, I want to do a research project. What are you working on?" And being curious about what your professors or your teachers are working on, and or bring an idea to, again, this is a wonderful organization, and I'm sure there are brilliant minds that are behind. And if there's a topic that more than one of you are interested in, and researching that and finding an avenue to either present or come up with a publication and seek out something like that out, because again, it's you never know what hasn't already been done. And if you can, work with someone or your favorite professor, which is what I did in school, and I learned that I actually didn't want to go in her field of pharmacy. And so that it's eliminating kind of a job or a pathway to seek is also a really good thing to know. Um, and then fellowships are awesome. I'd say, again, it's kind of a 2 year experiential program where you're invested in one particular field. Sometimes within different programs, they move you within a department. So for regulatory affairs, you could be exposed to strategy, like what I'm in, labeling. Which is basically writing the PI. You're like the person that, navigates the prescription information, or like I was talking about before. Or you're doing advertising promotion and you're reviewing all of the commercials and the pieces that you see in magazines and whatnot. And that's a position within regulatory affairs. And you can kind of have a rotational experience over those 2 years. So you don't actually have to pick, oh, I want to just be in this particular function for the rest of my life or my career. And so there is opportunity to be able to kind of find fellowships that give you exposure to more than one of the areas within um, a pharmaceutical industry. And then I'd say shadowing, if someone is willing to let you come in and shadow them for the day, or just having informational coffee chats with people, kind of like what I was saying, if you'd have an internship or an opportunity to do that. But just getting to know professionals and again through this organization, you're already doing that. And it's just, reaching out, see if you could, connect with someone a little bit further and try to better understand what your interests are. And really it does kind of take you a long way. And sometimes those people become your mentors and they can give you projects down the line. And it really can help. It's like from an early experience. It's just again being curious and trying to seek those out, kind of to kind of get your feet wet to see where you want to take your career.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's really interesting. You mentioned that you did some research projects before. So could you share a little more about what you researched, like specifically, and also provide some tips for how high schoolers or college students can find what they're interested in so they can research as well?
Yeah, so mine was actually with a investigational disease or infectious disease pharmacist and at the Beth Israel Hospital. And so she was one of our kind of like adjunct faculty. And I honestly thought that she was the coolest person. She like knew every single antibiotic known to man and how to treat any, infection that could have came. And so I was really excited about kind of pursuing a research project with her. And so what I did, and again, it was very niche. And so it was really, so I was able to go into Beth Israel Hospital and I was able to kind of sit there and look at all of the patients that they utilized vancomycin, which is a very strong antibiotic that's given IV, and really try to identify the trends how they used vancomycin in the hospital, what and the dosing and how they used it in what type of patients. And so I was able to basically develop a poster presentation for the hospital. She was able to then present that and I was credited on behalf of her. And then she also sent me like over the course of my time doing the research projects with her. She sent me. She was a peer reviewer for infectious disease journals, and she would send them to me, and I was then helping her peer review publications that weren't even published yet. And so some of those opportunities, so she's, it's again, she gave you one project and sometimes it turns into a lot of different little projects that then you get exposed to. Do I really like doing this? And so I'd say from that perspective, I was exposed to a little bit of that medcom or the medical science communications and publications a little bit by being a peer reviewer of publications early on. And so then I was like, I don't know if this is for me. But again, it was such a great experience. And I credit her to this day that to be able to kind of get my foot and understand, is this something that I wanted to pursue from a career standpoint?
Yeah, thank you so much. And then for one more follow-up just on that, do you have any tips for how like these high school or college students can find like internships or like also fellowships besides research programs? Like how can they look for them and secure them once they do find one?
So I'd say like one resource, at least from a pharmaceutical, if you're interested in the pharmaceutical industry. It's called Industry Pharmacists Organization. I know that from a, what's it called? From like when you're pursuing your pharmacy degree. they actually post every single fellowship on that website. So it's a great place. You may need like to be a member. Usually when you're in school or they have organizations, they're all over the United States in different pharmacy schools. And so they post all the different types of fellowships there. And then I'd say a lot of, if you're in the Boston area, a lot of pharmacy, I'd say one, it's like word of mouth. I know Alnylam does do summer internships for high school students. And so usually they have like talent acquisition. So I'd say, um, or they have university relations individuals. And so you can either go to your university relations. So if you're at a college, you can go to someone there, or even guidance counselors, they say in the Massachusetts, if you're in the Massachusetts area, guidance counselors at least can advise because sometimes students have done internships from a high school standpoint. But I'd say quite a few companies do have summer internships for high school students and or college students. But I'd say, and then I'd say be strategic in looking at what university you'd like to pursue. There are schools like for example, Northeastern, and I didn't go to Northeastern, but I'd say the fact that they have a co-op program, and that you're able to basically take an entire semester of school and work as in whatever field, and they're specific to either you want to do a rotational one like at a pharmaceutical industry, or you could do it at a hospital. But so Northeastern has a really great program built in. I know Wentworth has one if you're into engineering. So I'd say like look into those types of universities if you couldn't get one as a high school student, but you're like, okay, maybe my professor of science wants to help me, or my science teacher has unique programs, or they could connect me with someone. And it's just like trying to get yourself exposed early on. I know I did a bunch of science fairs early when I was in high school, just to kind of make sure I could work on a team. And we built, it was like kind of like a robotics, um, science competition. And so being able to be part of that. And then I went to a physics fair. And so so participating in those where you're challenged, and those are types of experiences that early on it'll start to help you network. You get to learn what your skill sets are, and kind of putting yourself in pressure situation to see, okay, can I do this or can I do that? So I'd say even those early on, in like from a high school standpoint, those are always also very helpful. I hope that answered some questions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is really helpful, especially for younger students, like maybe like me or a lot of other students in like this Zoom who are interested kind of in medicine, as well as like aspiring professionals that are really seriously considering pharmacy. So that's like some really, really helpful advice. And to maybe expand on your advice for growth, what would you suggest or advise younger women to do who are interested in STEM in general, but aren't really sure about like their specific path?
Yeah, and I'd say don't have to have everything figured out early. I'd say I definitely didn't. I probably thought I was going to be in every single pharmacy setting before I actually found what I currently am doing. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a pharmacist in a community pharmacy like CVS or Walgreens. And then I was like, maybe I'll be at a hospital and do this, and then maybe I'll do infectious disease. And it's like, again, you don't have to have it all figured out. And I definitely didn't. I'd say definitely be curious. So I'd say early on, like try to say yes to opportunities. If somebody's, again, the robotics competition that I had done in high school, or, hey, your teacher in physics was like, hey, we have this physics team. Do you want to be part of it? And it's just trying exposing yourself to opportunities, even if they feel uncomfortable. It's just putting yourself out there. It's not You don't have to know. Again, I loved physics, but I didn't end up going into engineering. But again, it was just the fact that I exposed myself to something, and you have to do physics when you're in pharmacy school, so it's still helped. And then I'd say find mentors. Find this organization is great. I'd say finding people of a like mindset, being able to, hey, you want to work on a research project? I'm really interested in this particular topic. Maybe we could do a poster. Maybe we could do some sort of, informational session that we kind of broadcast to our organization, put it up on YouTube. There's so much more. You have like technology at your fingertips that I think is really unique, that you could then kind of like get yourself out there early. Um, Finding mentors, reaching out to people, asking role models, kind of to challenge you, asking them, hey, is there something, advice that you could give me? So I'd say again, it's really just putting yourself out there. They're so diverse. You can and that's the thing. I always think about it, and I don't know if I'm going to be in regulatory for the next 40 years of my life. I can see like there are ways that, I'm like maybe I'll go into this function, or like I kind of see it as like every opportunity that you have, it's just like, is that something that you could excel or maybe you want to do? And so it's just being curious and not pigeonholing yourself in one particular area, and kind of letting your curiosity fuel um, kind of where you go, and your excitement to learn and try new things. And so I think, again, any path in STEM, I think, really can evolve. And so it's really not a weakness to be like, oh, I have so many interests. It's actually, I think it's more of a strength, the fact that you're able to kind of be a diverse individual and you use different parts of your brain in order to kind of go from one place to the next. So yeah. I'd say don't get discouraged. It's more just like use it as fuel to kind of help you kind of navigate what you want to do and try very, very different things. And it's okay if you fail.
Thank you so much for all of that. So that's it for our prepared questions. And for now, we'll transition into an audience Q&A. So for everyone
Yeah.
listening, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask it in the chat. We'll make sure that we'll get to them. So for the first question, I think it was from Chloe. She asked, you mentioned the co-op program. How does that work? Is that similar to an internship?
Yeah. So I'd say yes, it's kind of similar to an internship, but the co-op program is through the university. And so usually you're applying, the school kind of has, a list of companies or, places that you can apply. And so it's really, you're applying for a job. So similar to an internship where you prepare for your interview, you develop your cover letter, you develop your CV, and then you're interviewed as part of a pool of candidates for a particular role. They're at the company for I'd say like 6 months. So at Northeastern, it's 6 months. And so really it depends on where we're at, but I'd say you get easier projects, you get access to our systems, and then really you do a lot of different types of projects. Everyone at the company, within the regulatory affairs department, loves our co-ops, and they have plenty of projects that you get exposed to over the course of the couple months that you're there. And so it can range from precedence research to, presenting to a group about a unique FDA guidance, if FDA had released a new guidance, working on cover letters, actual submissions to the agency, with, obviously with the help of the person that is the US lead. And so so it kind of evolves over the course. Obviously, you're not doing all of that right at the beginning, and you kind of build your exposure and your experience. And then we do encourage the co-ops to go and talk to all of our fellows, who are recent graduates who basically have just gone through their PharmD programs or their PhD programs, and now they're, employees at at the company, and basically just to see how did they get to where they are, what did they do, why are they in the particular role that they are, and why do they like that one versus. And so it's, again, I'm not forcing people to do regulatory. I want them to learn and see if that's something that they want to do, for, their career, or is it like kind of one of those things where you can check it off your list of okay, I tried that, maybe it's not for me type of thing. And so I think it's also just making sure that they get a good amount of exposure. And at the end, they do a poster presentation to actually the whole company, and they all the co-ops kind of across the board. And there's tons of positions, at least at Alnylam, tons of positions, and employees come around and they ask you about all the projects that you've done and it's really just a great experience. And so it's similar to an internship of the type of work that you may be doing, but it's probably a little bit longer, and then just very finite point in time where you have to go back to school afterwards. It's from this time to this time.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like it was helpful. I mean, mentioned in the chat. So our next question, I think Michelle asked this. Everyone said that AI is rapidly reshaping the job market. And could you please share how it's specifically changing the pharmaceutical industry and the kinds of roles and skills that are the most affected?
So I'd say it's mostly, and it depends on the company. I know we are embracing it. And Alnylam uses it in some way, shape, or form. You have to obviously use the company's approved AI platforms that they're working with. So you can't be using, ones that are not okay, and like you're just going on and using your own AI. So I think it's more so to help facilitate you being more productive. I'd say for right now, there are a lot of really interesting companies that are using AI to help draft regulatory documents. At least I'd say I'm most exposed to what's happening in regulatory affairs from an AI standpoint. But I'd say so there are a lot of really interesting companies that are rolling out different AI technologies in order to help draft basically your entire new drug application to the agency. And whether or not that we've looked at them, they're still in the very early phases. But again, it's like how can you use AI to be more productive and advance rather than saying I'm never gonna necessarily use it and like we're afraid of it. Like I think if you're not willing to use it or embrace it in some way, shape, or form, that may affect your kind of trajectory in your role or in the company, because it is going to make your life easier, and they're going to be expecting more people to be able to, be more efficient. What can you cut out of your day to day that you can then have AI help you in some way, shape, or form? I think it's still evolving. It's still a very new field. And I'd say some companies, really the larger pharmaceutical companies, are kind of investing in their own AI platforms where they're going to develop them themselves. Some smaller companies might take something that's already built or off the shelf and then implement it into different systems. So I think right now we're kind of in the introductory phase of introducing it into um, our roles, but I do think it's more if you're not using it or you're not using it to help your day to day in some way, shape, or form to make yourself effective, it shouldn't be doing your job for you, but it should help you be more effective and productive. And okay, how can I make something faster or more efficient? Rather than it be, this is what, because then it can basically replace you. If you're letting it do your job, then it can replace you. So you have to obviously make sure that you're keeping up with the new trends and what's happening, new regulations in order to keep yourself relevant.
Well, I think that's a really like logical approach to AI because it is like really important to keep yourself relevant, but also be able to take advantage of like these new technologies that are coming out. So, kind of unrelated to AI, Michelle also asked, I'm trying to decide between PharmD, PhD, or Master of Public Health. If I'm interested in regulatory careers, would PharmD be the more common path?
I'd say we actually have someone in regulatory department in all three of those. So you can pursue. So there are people in regulatory affairs who have biology degrees, PhDs in biology, masters of public health, PharmDs. I'd say the path that I took is not the only way into regulatory affairs. Some people have MBAs. So it's really actually a really unique, I'd say it's a very unique kind of career path. But I do think just because I think the value of being, and I'd say the value of being a PharmD in regulatory affairs is that the fact that you know drug development, how drugs work in the body, like really, really well. Where I'd say PhD, I have a really great, wonderful colleague who is a PhD and now has actually transitioned from regulatory to clinical research, which I think she feels more aligns with kind of what she had done from a research standpoint early on in her career. And so it kind of you can do a lot, I'd say, with your PhD as well. But I do think, again, I'm biased to the PharmD path of getting into regulatory just because of the fact that it's you really do understand, and a lot of people at actually FDA, for example, are pharmacists. And so a lot of them are pharmacists, and then obviously you have physicians and PhDs that are also at the also in FDA. But I do think the fact that knowing drug development and knowing how drugs work in the body, and then being able to interpret the regulations in such a way that, okay, this is how this drug works, and I understand how what this says, and you're not just kind of like going through the motions or these are the regulations. It's you're able to apply them specifically for your particular product. And you're not just pigeonholed or specialized in one area. You can kind of move around. So I do think all of those um, paths are perfectly fine. And I do know people with those degrees that are in regulatory, and they're amazingly successful. And so again, I'm a little more biased on the the PharmD path, but it doesn't mean that if you really want to pursue a PhD and like specialize and do bench research first or something along those lines, or get your master's in public health, you can still pursue a career path in regulatory.
That's so cool how there's just so many different paths to get to where you are today. Related to that, Nicole asked, how did what you specifically studied in college slash high school influence your career path today? And how did you decide to major in medicine slash pharmacy instead of something like engineering or physics based on your previous interests? I know a lot of students today might not know exactly what they want to do in college right now, like based on their interests. So just wondering about how you got.
Um, I'd say it was heavily probably influenced by my family background. So I had both my parents were nurses, and I think engineering sounded really hard. I was good in math, but I just was a little nervous that as I said, I did the robotics. I was part of a robotics team in high school, and I'd say I wasn't the greatest on the team. I wasn't the strongest member, although I loved being part of it. I think that did scare me a little bit, and so I was like, okay, maybe that isn't for me from an engineering standpoint. And then the fact that I actually struggled the most, but I felt the most fulfilled in chemistry, particularly organic chemistry, in high school. And I think that the fact that I was able to then master it, so like I struggled really quite a bit in early on in my chemistry class, and I was a sophomore. So I was like, it was early on. I took AP chemistry as a sophomore. And so it was really tough. I had to really work hard. And by the end, I was able to really understand how, and I think that was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I really like organic chemistry. And that plays very nicely into pharmacy. And so I think that kind of, and then I started to my parents, they had pharmacists at their jobs, and so I met them and I like talked to them about how they got to where they were, and started to really kind of delve a little bit deeper. I was nervous going into a job and degree that was very terminal. Like I had to finish because at Mass College of Pharmacy it was a 0-6 program. So if I didn't graduate, I wouldn't have a degree. So that was something that was a little nerve-wracking for me. But I do think that the fact that I loved chemistry, particularly organic chemistry, was really, I think, and then talking to people who were pharmacists, really was kind of the path that solidified me going into pharmacy, particularly. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, for sure. And then switching gears just slightly. So Anna asked, how have changing FDA regulations impacted the regulatory process?
I'd say the interesting thing is that with the president, like the changing of the presidents, and actually, like Congress is every couple years, Congress actually regulates FDA. And so the things and the initiatives that are like worked on and focused on at the FDA are actually endorsed by Congress. And so it is really unique on whether or not a bill is going to be passed. For example, there is these rare pediatric disease vouchers. They sunsetted. So basically, if you invest in a rare pediatric disease, particularly, and then that drug gets approved, FDA used to grant you, if you applied, a waiver or a voucher. And then that voucher could then be applied to another program to expedite the development and expedite the review to make sure that that drug could then get to the market faster. And so that program actually sunsetted last year or back in 2024, I believe. And so it's actually been sitting in a bill. So it went to Congress and it was approved back in December, but now it has to go to the Senate in order to. So a lot of the so it's really interesting how much you actually have to pay attention to the initiatives and what's coming in to the House and the Senate and making sure that you are paying attention to those regulations and some of the initiatives that FDA is focusing on, just because it does change and that changes like the different strategies from my end. It's like from a strategic standpoint, is that a avenue that then we're able to pursue or not? And so I'd say I was really interested post in the COVID era. I'd say I was very interested to see how drug development, if drug development was going to have a different tone and lots of new regulations because we were, the environment, people weren't going into the hospital as often. Were you going to be doing remote assessments and whether or not more and more regulations were going to be implemented because of that? And so that was something that I was particularly made a change in my career, particularly around that time, just to make sure that I was following the regulations accordingly, because I wanted to make sure that I was advancing with the regulations and knew what was going to be happening post COVID. And so yeah, I'd say you really have to make sure you read. There's lots of great regulatory resources. One being like the Pink Sheet, and kind of just understanding what's happening. The Federal Register, where basically all the what the FDA is kind of working on or the guidances that they're coming out with are usually published there. And so you'd be able to kind of read up on them, just making sure that you're kind of up to date with what's happening. And so it does definitely change how we look at programs and how I strategize on programs, because you do need to make sure that you account for these things when you come to either file an application or you're seeking something else. So you do need to make sure that you kind of keep on top of those things as they change, because yeah, it's quite quite a lot of work. So if you make sure that you account for it early on, again, you need to be a good planner from that perspective.
Thank you so much. So one more question before I think our time is up. Grace asked, does your job require a lot of travel, including international travel?
So I'd say before COVID, we actually went to FDA quite a bit. And I went to FDA quite a bit. And now FDA is more open to virtual meetings. So sometimes you do go face to face. Now I have gone post-COVID to FDA. So I'm a global regulatory lead, and so I have gone to the European Medicines Agency. Sometimes, depending on if the meeting is in person for PMDA, you can travel to Japan or other regulatory health authorities globally. I'd say most of the time it's not very often that I'm traveling. It's maybe once or twice a year, depending on what meetings that I'm having. But that's usually where my travel would come into account, is really going to an actual regulatory health authority for an actual meeting. So
I think our
mostly
time is
domestic.
up. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
so I'd say, sorry, I was saying mostly domestic and then once in a very blue moon, potentially international.
Thank you so much. So, I think our time is up. So, for everyone, thank you so much for attending this chat. We really hope that it was able to help you all. And of course, thank you so much, Dr. Rothwell, for spending your time to share all this information with us. That's about the end of this chat, but we're going to put in the chat links to our Instagram, our website, and our Discord. So, anyone in this meeting who would like more information and more updates, please feel free to check out those resources. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Rothwell, for spending this time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you all.